Okay, welcome back. We're about ready to partition our hard drive. By the way, there are some different partitioning techniques, but I'm going to use the old tried and true one that perhaps maybe you're already familiar with, like from the Windows day. I'm going to use fdisk. There are others. Hey, now you know darn well I'm going to have to do a sudo on this, right? Come on, right? So sudo fdisk. And then I have to tell it the name of the device, which we already figured out is /dev/sdb. Right? Cool. All right. So /dev sbd db helps if you spell it right. Now it's going to ask me some questions, but they're pretty straightforward. It says, "Okay, you want to do this?" Yep. And it says, "Hey man, I don't see anything. What do you want me to do?" Yep. Okay. So I'm just going to show you this. This is in the book, but I'm going to hit the N for new partition. It says, "What do you want it to be?" Well, a primary partition. Maybe this is the old style, partition like from the DOS days. So that's okay. I'm going to say, go ahead and find. It'll be a primary. Cool. The partition number is the first one, so 1 is fine. And then the first sector, I'm just going to hit the default, because if I just hit return, it'll be the same thing as me typing 2004-8. Okay, cool. And then the last one, which is fine, I'm just going to hit the default a second time, because I don't want like typing all that stuff. Okay. And then, so we've kind of sort of partitioned things. No, we haven't. Not until we hit the write command. Because up to this point, all we've done is told it, well, I kind of like a partition. I'd kind of sort of like it to be a primary. I'd kind of like it to be the first one. And I kind of like it start here and end here. But we haven't actually written anything to the disk yet until we hit W. And W comes back and says, okay, we have partitioned the table. Okay, cool. And I've synced the disks. Okay, now here's what I'm going to do. I probably should have done this beforehand. Doggone it. I want to do an ls-al on the dev sd asterisk. Okay. If I had done this before, shame on me for not thinking about it, we would have not had that bottom one. Okay, would have not had the I can't say this, sdb1, because that partition didn't exist until we ran fdisk. Okay, so now that bottom one is there. Cool beans? Okay. So now that we got this thing and we have a partition on it, then I want to format it. So formatting a disk is one of the last steps. In other words, formatting puts the file system on the disk. I mean, the file system has to have like a root, so it's got to build the root, and then it's got to do some other things. It's got to build directory structures and all these things. And it even has a way of keeping spare sectors in case one part of the disk goes bad. It has spares that it can swap out. Kind of cool stuff. And so that command is pretty straightforward. It's the makefs command. So I'm going to say, of course I'm going to say sudo, and then makefs, which basically is like format, and tell it to type. I'm going to do an ext4, and then what device I want, not just the device, what partition I want, which is dev sd, I cannot say that to save my life, sdb1. Whew. Okay. And then it says, okay, here we got, we've made some backups, and we've created some done all those things. Okay, so now we actually have a file system on our disk. So are we done? Let's see now. We created a mount point. We went in there, we partitioned the drive, and we formatted the drive, and then what do we do next? We mount the thing, of course. That's the last part. I want to do a mount on this guy. By the way, it's not going to have anything in him, right? Wouldn't you think? So, of course, I'm going to do a sudo, and I want to do the mount command, right? Okay. Now, here's the cool part. Basically, all I have to do to mount is tell it what the thing is, SDB1, okay? That's the device. And then where I want to mount it to, which is in my case, is public. Okay, so the mount command, I don't have to use that -T option like we did before to tell it what the file system is, because the machine is actually smart enough. When we try to mount this disk, it's going to look at it and go, oh, I see this has got an ext on there, so we're okay with that. And so, doink. Okay, so now if I go over here and do an AL-A on public, it's still, oh wait, I've got a lost and found. What is that? Well, if the machine messes up, and you know, like it crashed and came down dirty, data that has been not quite written or file names that got lost appear in this lost and found directory. Kind of cool. It's an error checking thing. We don't typically use it in our business, but it's a very cool way of doing data recovery. Okay, now we're not quite done, and that is, this is great, but I want to look at how it did that. So there's a thing called a mount tab or M tab. Okay, so I'm going to just take a look at. I'm just going to do a cat on etc M tab. Okay, so M tab is all this stuff. So down at the bottom is where ours is, okay? So it basically talks about the file, the device, the location, the file system, and then some other stuff. We're mounting this guy, read, write, relative time, then data and ordered and some other stuff, okay? So let's talk about what relative A time, it's not relative time, it's relative A time. What that actually means, because it's a little geeky, so just bear with me. All right. In the beginning, the system recorded every time the date and time stamp for when a file was created, when it was last written to, and the last time anyone ever actually read the file, the access time. Okay. And that was pretty cool because I could go through and see, hey, when's the last time anyone's ever even looked at this file? The problem is, as file systems got larger and larger and larger, there was an awful lot of things that were looking, somebody did a find command or somebody did an ls command or, all sorts of things. And it turned out that keeping track of that access time, the A time, was actually consuming a huge amount of resources on the machine. And it would slow the file system down to the point where, like, good grief, I just realized, okay, never mind. It was slowing the system down tremendously, so they decided they were going to change it. And so what they did is they have some options. And one of the options is, I can use the honest-to-God real access time, which practically no one uses. Then you have no A time, which means don't even bother to keep track of it at all. And then this one means every once in a while, but at least once a day, it's going to go through and sync that thing. That way, as you're reading a file, it's not immediately spending the time and energy to go update that A time, over and over and over and over. So it's kind of a lazy, what they call lazy writes. It lazily puts things up to snuff. So the A time is never 100% accurate. Okay, cool. All right. Now, this is pretty cool because that last line is basically what we did. Now, what I want to do is I want to fix this so every time we, first of all, hang on a second. Before we get that very far, I was going to do a manual command on M tab. Oh, okay. Never mind then. So, if I want to make this thing happen automatically, there's a thing called the FS tab, File System Tab. Okay, we're going to do that. FS tab. And FS tab is just a file that contains a list of all, and it's going to look very similar to the M tab, okay? Very similar. It basically talks about all of this is when I boot the system, here's where I want you to go to do stuff. And so they list all these files and all this stuff. And to tell you the truth, I'm not going to go through all that stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that I know what the hell I'm talking about. Boy, is that a horrible assumption. And I'm just going to go edit that damn file right now. Now, I will tell you, if you make a mistake in this file, your machine may not boot. So, I would highly recommend you use that feature in VirtualBox where you make a snapshot. Yeah, snapshots. So in case you screw this thing up and you reboot and it comes up and says, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, you can say, oh, okay, and you can get back. Now, I'm not going to do that because I'm trusting that I'm not going to make a mistake. So, how about this? At least pay attention and be really, really careful. So I'm going to do a sudo, and I'm going to do vi on etc. fs tab. Now they got some really cool examples. It's not hard to see on how I want to do this. So I'm just basically going to go in and tell it, here's what I want to add to this guy. So, and it's the exact same order as they appeared before. I want in the M tab. So I want dev sdb1. Okay, cool. And then a tab. And then where it's mounted, which is public. And then a tab. And then I could put a whole bunch of, well, no, this one is going to be the file system, so ext4. Cool. And then I could have an awful lot of options out there. But to take, because we saw them in MTab, where it was RW, comma, and relative time, and all the rest of that stuff. But one of the things you can do is you can just use the word defaults. Defaults. Okay. And then some numbers. And the numbers are talking about when do they boot, and the order in which they boot, and the order in which the file system is checked. Okay, now let me explain this one. All right. So, yes, I want this thing to come up. But if there is a problem, and the machine has to run a file system check on this thing, FSCK. If it has to run an FSCK on this guy, is it all that important that this one be run at the same time, or should this one have wait until the first one is done? So yeah, I want the main drive to come up first, and it can take its damn time on this one. Cool? Okay. So I'm just going to hit Shift ZZ, So in theory, we could reboot this guy and come back up and it'll work. All right, let's try that. So I'm just going to do a reboot. Brrr. Wait for this little bad boy to come back up, and hopefully it won't have any problems because I didn't mung up the FS tab file. Okay. CIS4335 2020. And then I do an ls on al on /public, and I should get the lost and found. Okay. Now, by the way, now that we got this thing mounted, I probably want to change the read and write permissions on this thing to provide access for my users, because right now the only people who can write to it is root. Well, that's pretty dumb, right? So one of the things we need to probably do is to change permissions and change groups, right? Something like that. Like if this was the engineering group or the sales group, okay, I'd have to go in and change. In fact, I'm not going to do it because it's too much like an upcoming assignment. I'm going to have to change the group on this guy to some other group. And then I'm going to have to change the write permission for the group so that members of that group could go in there. So that's how you have to do it. You have to do change the group and then change the permissions. Cool? Okay. Well, that's cool. By the way, you might be thinking, hey, that FS tab thing would be a really cool way for me to automatically mount that VBox SF thing, the thing that allows me to see the other system, see my Windows host machine. It's more complicated than that. And rather than explaining the workarounds of how to make that work, we're just not gonna do that, unfortunately. Yes, it can be done, but it's not done solely with the FS tab, because when the machine boots up, it prioritizes what modules get loaded at what time. And unfortunately, the VirtualBox thing gets loaded really, really late. And so if you try to mount it before that file system exists in the kernel, it won't mount. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You know what's going on.